It's Monday, November 4th, 2019. I am Pete Dominic. This is Stand Up, and we are podcasting, baby, episode 2. I'm in L.A. Flew out here Sunday. Here's the news. Beto O'Rourke dropped out of the presidential race, and President Trump responded the way only a total full asshole would. He said, Beto quit like a dog, he was a nasty guy, and all kinds of other trash. Firefighters have been able to contain this wildfire just in time for me to arrive. 70% of the wildfires raging across this state of California have been contained, and that's really, really good. I'm out here in Los Angeles, where I will be appearing on the biggest podcast in the world on Tuesday. Tuesday we tape, and it goes up on Wednesday, the Joe Rogan Experience. I cannot wait for that. And thank you for tuning in and subscribing. Today, my guest is Congressman Tim Ryan from Ohio, who also just dropped out of the presidential race. Oh, by the way, Marianne Williamson, Tom Steyer, and Tulsi Gabbard are still in. And Joe Biden, I think, is just waking up from his nap. 51 days until Christmas, 91 days until the Iowa caucuses, and the 2020 election is 1 year from yesterday. And by the way, 23 days now since the last live show on Sirius XM that I hosted. And not that I'm counting, but I did want to be transparent with you and talk just very briefly right here at the top about how difficult the last couple of months have been and how happy I am to have you listening to the podcast. If you're new to the podcast, I'm really excited to have you. We are going to learn a lot together here from some really smart people and have a lot of fun with you. But the last 2 months of my life have really been the most challenging, and I knew things weren't looking good at work at SiriusXM after 12 years for Stand Up and the channel. And at about that time, when I knew it was probably going to end, was when my dad had a heart attack. My dad, who is 75, my parents, who are happily married. How many years? I'm going to call him and ask him how many years they've been married. But anyway, it's been tough because then shortly after that, he fainted because the med they gave him brought his blood pressure down or something, and he fainted, and he landed. He bounced his face off the counter and ripped his eye open. He lacerated his eye and had to have emergency surgery, and now he's on surgery 3 coming up. He just had his second one, and it's just been hellacious for my mom, and I've had to go up there. It's just been a very difficult time, and trying to get this podcast off the ground, and it's been a real struggle, and I'm really happy that we are finally up, and things are going a little better, and we're going to be making a lot of improvements on it each and every day. But you know what? Let me call my parents. I want to know how long they've been married, and then we'll get to Tim Ryan. How many years have you guys been married?
48.
Is that right, Mom?
Yep.
Okay.
That's right. You didn't think I knew?
No, I thought you knew, Dad. I just needed that information for the podcast.
Oh. I subscribed.
You subscribed to the podcast, Mom?
Yeah.
All right. Episode 2 is coming up, and I've got Congressman Tim Ryan, who just dropped out of the presidential race, on.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Beto O'Rourke did too.
Beto O'Rourke, yeah, he dropped out too, yeah. How do you feel about that?
I would have voted for him.
You like Beto, huh, Dad?
I like him.
Mom, you sound pretty excited that I've got Tim Ryan on today's episode.
Well, I'm glad for you.
Yeah.
If you do. I mean, I don't know a lot about him, actually.
Yeah, well, you're about to.
Really
you're about to find out a whole lot about him. I sat down in his office and interviewed him. Are you ready to? Why don't you introduce it, Mom? Right now, I'm recording.
What do you want me to say?
Just say, here's Pete's conversation with Congressman Tim Ryan, right from his office.
Okay, here we go. Here's Pete's conversation with Tim Ryan, Congressman Tim Ryan, right from his office.
You nailed it. Thanks, Mom.
Oh, yeah.
All right, bye. Love you guys. Love you, Dad.
Love you. Have a good time. All right. Wait.
LA. What do they call it there?
What do they call it?
What do they call it when you're in LA?
What do you?
L.A.
When you're in LA, how do they refer to LA?
Yeah.
They call it Oregon. What the hell are you talking about?
Like if you're in Syracuse, they call it the Cuse.
Oh, right. Yeah, they just call it LA Pop.
They call it L.A.
Yeah.
I lived there once for 8 months.
All right, we got to get to Tim Ryan.
All right.
Okay. Love you. Bye.
Bye.
Well, I am here in the office of Congressman Tim Ryan, and he represents Ohio's 13th district, which covers Northeast Ohio from Youngstown all the way to Akron, is my understanding. He was running for president up until about a week ago, and we're sitting down about a week until we're sitting down today. And he took this office when he was 29 years old, the youngest Democrat at that point. Is that right?
Yes.
Been reelected 5 times, and I'm a big fan of his since I heard of him because of the book he wrote about mindfulness, and we're going to talk about that and his presidential run and anything else we can. Congressman Tim Ryan, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for being here.
So, first of all, how do you feel a week after announcing that you're dropping out of the race and that you're running for re-election for your congressional seat? It's been about a week.
Yeah, my body and my mind have finally started to calm down, because it was just so much travel, so much up in a car to the airport, run through the airport, jump on a plane, fly, land, car, speak, run, go to a hotel, unpack your bag, fall asleep, get up in the morning, get dressed, pack your bag, throw it in the car, and that just went on for months and months.
You started that in April and went for about 7 months, and were there days off? How old are your kids?
Kids are 16, 15, and Brady is 5.5.
Okay, well, I think we need some updated photos in the office. I'm looking around.
Yeah,
I got a lot of little photos of them when they were little. I feel like I don't see any recent teenager shots. I just was assuming they were a little bit younger.
Yeah, no, we need to do that.
So I mean, did you get to see how much did you see your family during that time?
Not a whole lot. I mean, there were stretches of 2 weeks where I wasn't home, which sucked. And then there were, moments where I was able to get home for a couple days, and I tried. Our oldest plays varsity football, so he's a junior. So I wanted to get home for some of his games. I missed 1 or 2, but I was there for all the rest. And my youngest, and Bella, who's cheerleader for the varsity team, so she was at the football game, so it was like a twofer.
Right.
And then Brady played flag football for the first time, so I missed a couple of his games, but made most of them. So tried to have some balance, which there isn't much, but I tried to have some.
You were a football star yourself in high school, and your son is now playing. Your other kids playing flag football. How concerned are you about the danger of the sport, having been an athlete yourself and your kid playing?
I'm concerned. I think a lot of it is, when you see what's happening with some of these NFL players, I think it's just the consistent over time. Then it's college, and you get redshirted, so it's 5 years of college.
Right.
How long are you in the pros? And so there is some concern. We're actually having a big summit in Youngstown. We started this additive manufacturing 3D printing institute.
Oh, cool.
One of the best ones in the world is in Youngstown. And the NFL's coming in the middle of November, and we're going to do a big conference with the NFL to try to figure out safety issues around helmets.
The Hall of Fame is there. Is that right?
Hall of Fame's in Canton, which is about an hour away.
Also in Ohio, though. So anyway, you're on the presidential campaign for 7 months. You're going crazy. Do you have you have some days off, right?
Yeah.
But you traveled. Where did you travel? All over the country campaigning?
Well, it was mostly Iowa, South Carolina, and New Hampshire, and then New York and L.A.,
right.
San Francisco to try to do some fundraising. But primarily, it was, for the longest time, it was Iowa. And then the crazy thing is, Iowa, family joke is you can't get there from here.
Right.
You can't get a straight freaking flight from Cleveland or Pittsburgh, which I live in between, to anywhere in Iowa. So you've got to go
No, did anybody tell you that before you decided to run for president?
I would never run.
If you didn't know.
And it's almost the same with South Carolina. You got to fly into Charlotte, then you fly from there to Greenville, or you fly into Charlotte and down to Columbia. And it's just you can't get there from here.
The thing that I think really sucks about campaigning for office, whether it's your congressional seat that you hold right now for 5 terms or running for president, is the fundraising. Mm-hmm. Like the idea that you have to spend so much time asking people for money, it's clearly a broken system. I mean, how do you look at that in terms of its necessity and if there's any way to solve it?
You're going to need, I think, significant scandal or whatever to help maybe stimulate it. I'm for public financing. Right. I think that's the way to do it. I think we should do what Europe does, where you have like 2 months to have a national conversation or local conversation around these topics. Not a constant running of the conversation where you're never governing and it's always about fundraising. And the fundraising, obviously sucks, and it's no fun, and it gives a lot of people a lot of influence. But right now, it's a part of the game, and it's why I ended up getting out. I mean, I didn't have them from Youngstown. I didn't have Silicon Valley. I didn't have Boston, New England. I didn't have New York. I didn't have New Jersey to keep me floating. And so that so the
when you name those places, you're naming places in terms of other candidates you were running against, is my suspicion, because you're talking about Cory Booker and Elizabeth Warren. Yeah. They have networks in those places.
They have networks in those places. And the other thing is,
and you don't have that kind of money in Ohio. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
You don't have that,
especially
like, really.
Youngstown. I mean, I'm not from Columbus. I'm not from Cleveland.
Is that where the money is in Ohio? If there is, it's those. Yeah.
And the other thing is, like, everyone had like an Ivy League network. Like Harvard Business School. That's a huge network of people around the country. And I'm not making excuses. It's just like, this is...
No, you're explaining it. That's exactly what I'm asking.
This is the reality of it. And so you have certain built-in advantages. And what I didn't like about the whole thing is, like, the days of the Jimmy Carter, especially with the debate style that they had, or the formats that they had, and the construct of the debate, it really limits the dark horse. The dark horse, and I've been a dark horse every major campaign I've run in, whether it was state senate or Congress, both primary and general.
Right.
You need time. You need to meet, like, I need to retail my
dark
way.
horse is the same as underdog, right?
Yeah.
Like, not the likely
totally.
Winner.
Yeah. And so I would need time. Like, I have to retail my way into office, which is what I did for state senate. And, I went to bowling alleys, went to bingo halls, house parties.
I mean, some of that stuff, though, hold that mic a little closer to your face, Congressman. But some of that stuff has got to feel really frustrating to go to a bowling alley and connect with people. But if you only raise a few bucks, it's got to be like, is this the best way to spend my time? I want to connect to possible voters and hear about their issues and talk about my solutions. But man, I just spent an hour and a half in a bowling alley listening to some lady gripe and complain and not know that the time is money. I got to get going. I got to get to other people. I mean, it's got to be really sometimes. Are there times like that?
Well, that's what I enjoy, though. Like, I like that. Like, that's how you learn. That's how you stay connected. Sure. That's how you really understand why you're running. The hopes, the dreams, the pain, the suffering, all the emotions that go into what people are feeling. That's why I'm running. But
I guess what I mean is, after an hour, I appreciate that. But after an hour of talking to somebody, how did your brain start to be like, did we raise any money at that event? Unfortunately, do you start to get conditioned about worrying about having to raise money?
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's one of the big problems. So I wanted to talk to you and a bunch of other people, but you were one of the first people I reached out to, because I'm thinking about running for Congress in my district, and I thought, what a unique. Whenever I wanted to do anything in my life, I've always found people who already did it and asked them a bunch of questions.
Where do you live?
I live in Nita Lowey's district, where she just, now she'd be retiring after 33 years. Yeah. And I just ended my gig at SiriusXM, and I'm looking for something, positive to do, something to I wrote down, I want to save the planet, save democracy, and make the world a better place for my daughters. What's my next job? And then the next day, she announced she was resigning. Yeah. It's in my district, and I'm a unique, kind of non-traditional candidate. And I understand policy, I understand people, I can communicate. But the money thing to me is, my question to you is, my wife doesn't want me to run because how will we make money for the next year? How does anybody run for even a congressional seat for a year
Yeah.
and have an income to pay their bills. Like and I'm a pretty well-off guy, but we've got mortgage, we've got kids. How do I pay those bills? I don't want to take the money from the yeah. I don't want to exactly. I mean, I don't want to take money from the campaign. Someone told me I could do that, but that doesn't seem right to me. And fund my daughter's ballet classes while I'm running for Congress. Right. Do you think that it's accessible to most ordinary, much less even more affluent people to kind of take their life, put it aside, and run for office for what seems like at least a year for a congressional seat and raise about $500,000 minimum?
No, most people can't do it. I mean, you have to be in a couple of different positions, and this is what you see.
Your spouse maybe has a good job and health insurance. I mean, my wife makes like $50,000 a year and doesn't have health insurance. I just found out health insurance for 4 people is $2,500.
Yeah. So you get young people. So I was single.
Right.
I ran for the state Senate. I won. I was single, making $60,000 a year in basically a part-time job, political job. So I could run for Congress without much. You see people who are empty nesters, right? Their kids are growing up. People are out of the house. Bills are paid. Comfortable life. You could take a shot, and do it. And then the real problem is you see people who have money, like who are worth millions of dollars.
Right.
And if you get that number in the Congress now, you're seeing more and more people because, even making $175,000 a year, which is a lot of money from where I come from, but you get a lot of people that live in New York, one of the most expensive housing markets. Then you'll have to live in D.C., one of the most expensive housing markets in the country. And so now you have an apartment here and a house at home.
And you got your place here that doesn't get subsidized by any. That comes out of your salary, your rent, however you.
There used to be a $3,000 tax credit, and that went away in the last thing. So you have those like real world financial constraints for most people. I think of guys like Joe Crowley or Greg Meeks that live in New York. I mean, you're living in New York. Your family's in New York. That's expensive. And you have a place in D.C.
Well, Joe Crowley's no longer here.
Now Joe doesn't have that problem anymore. But
AOC isn't at least she's a single woman, and but I mean, she's in that situation. Yeah,
I mean, you can go through. Interesting. And that's pretty much what you get.
So talk to me about, I wanted to talk a little bit about like the day-to-day job. I mean, your family's in Ohio, your wife and kids, and you're here. What is that schedule like? How often do you go home and do you split time? Do you always fly home from Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, pretty much been flying. For a while, I'd fly or drive.
But you got to pay for all those flights too out of your pocket?
No, you get what's called a member's allowance.
Okay.
And so it's about $1 million a year. I don't even know what it is. It's maybe a little over $1 million a year. And out of that, you pay all your staff, full-time, part-time.
You decide the salary structure on your staff?
Salary structures. They can't make more than a member of Congress. And then you buy furniture. You have offices in your district. So I have 3 offices.
Pay rent.
Computers.
Overhead.
Like furnish it and staff there.
Interesting.
And then your flights back and forth when they're official, for official business coming back and forth to D.C., that's covered.
What would be unofficial? At what point would you
usually personal stuff or campaign stuff.
Right.
So, if you're out to dinner in D.C., last night I had a dinner with 6 or 7 people. That's a campaign dinner because people there raised money for me and all that stuff.
Is that hard for you to keep track of that so that you don't violate some ethics rule that you, of course, would never want to, but didn't know that this dollar here or that trip there couldn't be done? Is that something that you go through orientation? They give you a book?
Not really. I mean, now and again, you'll write a check to the campaign just, I got reimbursed from the official or campaign or something, and it was personal, and you just, make sure you're covered.
I wanted to talk to you about
I have one rule. I want to drool on the pillow every night.
That means
I don't ever want to worry about. I replaced a guy who went to jail for 7 years.
Yeah, Jim Trafficking. I was
correct.
And
I was like, that is not happening to me.
Meaning you don't want to. That's what I mean. I want to talk to you a little bit about corruption and or whatever word we would, an ethical breach and. How often do you think that people know that they're doing something wrong, and does it ever happen where they didn't realize that they'd met with a person that they shouldn't, they'd spent money in a way that they shouldn't? Because I'm thinking about that rule, and wanting to stay as clean as you can and never be in trouble. But does it happen sometimes that people get in trouble accidentally? I mean, is it hard to get?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, but for the most part, you see people who are like using their campaign money to do something, you know, or having a lobbyist pay for your daughter's wedding. I'm thinking like Duke Cunningham from a few years ago.
What are the ways in which people would try to corrupt Congressman Tim Ryan or anybody else? Meaning they want you to do something for them. They want you to vote for a piece of legislation against a piece of legislation, get rid of a regulation. So they're going to do this or that for you. Is it always overt? Do you see a lot of that? Because I feel like it's mostly just kind of legal stuff that happens that we don't like.
Yeah, I think most of it's kind of campaign contributions, and then you vote a certain way. People give you money, you vote a certain way. That I think is more
of the obvious
stuff.
Right.
I mean, if you're using your credit card for your campaign in Europe, like that's fucked up. I mean, you're going to get busted. That's stupid.
Are you referring to something
Nobody
that
in
happened?
particular, but I'm just saying like that would be something really bad to do.
Right.
And you know, using your money for personal stuff. Like Jesse Jackson Jr. got a few years ago. He's buying Rolex watches and furnishing his basement. Like you can't do that. You know?
How much do you have to worry about some guy with a hidden camera, these James O'Keefe assholes, or you know, the other day, you know, Congresswoman Katie Hill got run out of town by like a revenge porn scandal, apparently. Like, do you have to always be vigilant that someone's trying to set you up somewhere, anywhere they're talking to you when you think it's a private conversation, and then they take what you said out of context? And I mean, is that something you always got to be aware of?
Sometimes. I mean, sometimes you let your guard down.
I mean, yeah, of course.
You just, you know, you had a long day, you're out having a beer, and somebody's, you know, doing that. But it's kind of weird now. I mean, knock on wood, like, you kind of know if someone's like...
You do.
You kind of like, someo's asking you a question, and you're like, why is he asking me this question?
Who are you? Why are you talking to me? Right. Why are you in a Russian accent? What is that?
And you smell like vodka.
Yeah, why are you doing that? Why are you wearing a bearskin hat also? What's with the outfit? Why don't you just leave me alone?
You smell like...
I'm not Tim Ryan. Everybody always thinks I am. I just saw you were talking to some, I think, union reps probably from Ohio, some constituents of yours. But, I overheard them talking about lobbying. And it's interesting that word has a really negative connotation, as I think it should. But the bottom line is veterans lobby, teachers lobby, gun control people lobby. And every day people are in your office talking to you, advocating for whatever their interests are back in your district. What is a day like generally? Who do you meet with on a typical day when you're in Washington?
There's a busy season. The busy season for us in DC is usually late winter, spring, early summer, because that's the appropriations process. So when we're putting together our budget, spending money on certain programs, that's when you get a lot of people coming in. And it can be anywhere from people in the defense industry who have a particular program in defense, a technology they're trying to push. And then you have the Alzheimer's Association.
Right.
So, they're all lobbyists, but
one's looking for a cure for a horrible disease, and the other is looking for you to vote a certain way or on something that'll fund their defense project.
Yeah, and not all of them are bad. I mean, it's like
sure, right. I think people don't understand that though.
Yeah, I mean that's part of the problem with the national conversation or lack of national conversation is there's zero nuance.
Couldn't agree more with you. That's why I appreciate you, by the way, doing a sit down like this. That's why, I'm in cable news. You were appearing, you're always on cable, especially when you're running for president. And then watching the debates, it was just, the whole thing's a farce because you have to try to train your brain to communicate in short thoughts and bursts that are going to get the beginning, middle, and end of a solution to a major problem across. That is not how anything should ever work.
No.
Especially when you're trying to solve big problems.
Be titillating so you can raise low dollar money off of, certain groups that are out there.
Right.
And so, that's the problem. It's like, okay, we're having a national conversation. Okay, should we have troops everywhere around the world? No. I mean, as few as we possibly would need. But then we just saw what happens when we move troops out of this one area in northern Syria. where we were helping protect the Kurds from Turkey coming in. We remove them, and it becomes potentially a genocide.
Meaning the point of that is that if you don't have a little bit of a nuance about the issue of where our military forces are deployed, then you're not really having a thoughtful conversation.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, pretty much. I mean, and you can be on each side and be more one way or more the other way, but it's like I have no interest in having our troops, who we have to pay for with our tax dollars, somewhere where they don't need to be.
Right. Well,
like I have no agenda for that. It's like, well, if we move them, this group of people is going to get slaughtered.
But somebody always does have an interest in having troops somewhere, and we can talk about that. I mean, we can talk about Afghanistan, Iraq, or Germany, or South Korea. But I wanted to also ask you, I have gotten the opportunity to interview a whole bunch of congressmen, and I really enjoy talking to people who work in government. I'm not someone who hates government. I'm someone who thinks it's a necessity. I'm someone who thinks it can be a really important power for good and to create solutions. I think you've done a really good job in terms of policy as well as role modeling. I think your book and your work on mindfulness in schools is seminal and super important, and you're a pioneer in that, and it'll probably be a huge part of your legacy that I hope that you're really proud of. But most people don't like Congress in America, and most people, and I think that's because most people have no idea what your job is. And one example of that is people always talk about, well, you're out on recess, you're only in Washington half the time, you only work half the year. And that could not be further from the truth. When you're not in Washington, you're in your district meeting with people in your district about their concerns, right?
Yeah.
Sorry for the softball question, but I mean, I think that's a very popular misnomer.
Well, and if you don't ever come home, they'll be like, why don't you ever come home? You're never around.
Great point.
So you're
lose.
Look, and it's like, and it's the same with teachers. I mean, it's like, they only work 9 months out of the year, and whatever.
Don't get me started on that.
My wife's a first grade teacher, and it's like I just read this article the other day about teachers. It's like they have the most exhausting profession because they make the most decisions in the course of one day than any other profession.
That's a really interesting point. They have to make split-second decisions that affect kids, cognitive, safety, everything.
Yeah.
My mom is a public school teacher, and I do a lot of work with teachers' unions. And I volunteered at my daughter's elementary school a couple of years ago. And whenever I talk to teachers or people who are critical of teachers, I say, spend 5 minutes in a class with 30 kids. And if you don't want to murder the kids, then let me know. But I mean, I spent 5 minutes and this kid wouldn't shut up. And I went from, hey, Seth, could you just pay, Seth, I'm going to kill you, kid. Like I couldn't. And so I have so much respect for teachers and how difficult, if they didn't get the summers off, then they'd go completely mad. So that's, I'm always happy to hear you talk about.
I mean, it's like, I hope, it's clearly not going to happen now with Trump as president, but I hope that the next iteration of the country is more mindful, more about recognizing, look, everybody's struggling here. Everybody's trying to figure this out. I heard David Brooks talk the other night, and he gave this amazing speech, and it was just about
New York Times columnist, leans conservative, but he's no fan of Trump.
And kind of, I mean, he's conservative, but he's kind of moderate now. I mean, who knows what the political spectrum is anyway? But he was making this great point. He was like, look what we're trying to do here. Like, we are trying to integrate the most multicultural country that's ever existed. We're trying to do it in the middle of globalization and automation and huge income inequality. Like, we're trying to solve some huge issues. Let's take it easy on each other here, and have a conversation about how do we fix this stuff.
Well,
and I just, let me say, I think it's easy to go after big business, right? I mean, clearly there have been the opiate epidemic, with the pills and the pharmaceutical companies are what they're doing.
Right. The oil industry, the financial industry, the gun. Yeah, it's easy to go after big business.
Then you have guys like Mark Benioff at Salesforce, where it's a compassion capitalism. It's a conscious.
He has
capitalism.
a sense of social responsibility.
Right. They do, how many millions of hours of volunteer work, and how much they give back to charity, and how that you take care of your workers. And I was on a panel yesterday with Jim Purdue with Purdue, the the poultry manufacturer, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how
The
many
chicken slaughter guy.
how many years ago they took all the antibiotics out of the chickens.
Yeah.
Right? They're putting vegetables into the chicken now. So you get like actually one helping of vegetables in this whatever product they have.
Is that kind of fungible?
They're moving to they stopped feeding like,
Newspaper, I think, is what they fed them before then. Yeah, they're much more delicious now. You're saying,
my point is like, okay, they're not all bad, and like most small business people are just trying to make a living,
right?
And so there's some assholes, and you need to totally bust their balls.
Yeah,
that they're doing things wrong, and they're treating people wrong, and they're destroying the environment and whatever. But like, if we keep just fighting with each other, we're not solving.
Well, yeah, but nobody seems to have the solution for that, and I certainly don't. I mean, I blame media.
Yeah.
People that are in my business, and I want to make this business more responsible, more thoughtful, more thought-provoking, and have listeners listen to long form conversations, nuanced conversations with problem solvers like yourself. But how do you change that? You just got done running for president. You probably did more media in that year than you have your whole time here in 5 terms in terms of the national, cable news and so on, those quick hits, those they try to get you to, call out your opponents. They're trying to get ratings. Mm-hmm. They're trying to get ratings. You're trying to get votes. A lot of that is divide and conquer. I hear what David Brooks is saying. I agree with that. I agree with what you're saying. But between cable news and social media, it doesn't seem like that's going to change, that we're going to have a more thoughtful conversation where there isn't just black hats and white hats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you have any idea? You shouldn't. Nobody knows right now.
I mean, obviously the president is a cultural figure more so than anything else.
Right.
And that could be helpful. I think, local community, figuring out a way how to do this in local communities, local churches, like really trying to figure out how do we, in our schools, I think that needs to be a big part. Again, it's like, you're familiar with like Kaizen, the Japanese did this during, when they were trying to, I think it started during World War II, but they started to do it with the auto industry, and they make small changes that will change the trajectory of their product.
Right.
And the idea is like there's no best, just better. Okay? There's no best. You never get to a best. You just get
interesting.
better,
I'm not familiar with that.
Anyway, long story short is they implemented this Kaizen method, and they took over the global auto industry. Right?
Yeah.
Constantly getting better.
Yeah.
There's been some cool movies, one with Michael Keaton about when he was the head of the union.
That's right. Yeah.
I forget what it was called. But,
I did too,
so what can we do over the long haul to
make incremental change?
And I think it starts in the schools.
But people want change every quarter, businesses in every, congressional or presidential terms. Very hard for you to create those changes in 2-year stints.
So everything is cutting against that.
Right.
We started talking about raising money 2 years worth, and whatever, you're constantly running, and you're right, every 3 months you got to report your quarterly earnings. So we can do things like move it to 6 months quarterly earnings. Do stuff in schools where we actually are teaching kids social and emotional learning, which I wrote about in my book.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that we got to wrap it up. Healing America: How a Simple Project Can Help Us Recapture the American Spirit. Really, really great book, and important work. How do you explain that here at the end of our conversation, the importance of mindfulness and social and emotional learning in schools and in businesses and in Congress, in your life?
We have millions of kids in the country and people in the country that are in trauma. And when you look at the latest brain science, in which we've learned more in the last 20 years than we have in the previous 200,
right,
we understand what happens to your brain when it goes into fight or flight mode, when you're just completely stressed out.
Right.
You literally can't access your executive functions in your prefrontal cortex, which are your working memory, decision-making, ability to control your attention span. So really important things to learning, but really to be civilized. So what social emotional learning does, mindfulness, transcendental meditation, a lot of these contemplative practices, they help get your brain out of fight or flight mode. And when you look at society today, we see deaths of despair, high rates of suicide, teens, police, fire, veterans, high rates of suicides, teachers stressed out,
Yeah.
income inequality.
Yeah.
So we're all living right now in a state of high alert. And what I want to do is get these implemented in schools, healthcare, vets, other areas, teach these kids how to get themselves out of fight or flight mode. And part of that would be it's conflict resolution,
Yep.
build resiliency,
Recognize your thoughts.
recognize your thoughts, let them go. They're just thoughts, come back, deeper listening, paying attention, giving a shit about what someone else is saying, what their
Yeah,
status in life
absolutely.
is. And doing all these things can be helpful. Again, that's Kaizen. So because we're going to teach our kids this. And this is what's happening in our schools right now. Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning.
And it's
out of
working.
Chicago. It's working. And what happens? Light bulb. 11 percentile point increase in test scores. Because when you get your brain out of fight or flight mode, you feel connected to your teacher, to your
Right.
fellow students. You resolve conflict in a responsible way. You can then access your prefrontal cortex and your test scores go up.
Congressman Tim Ryan, two quick last questions. What do you think of President Trump? He tweeted about you condescendingly when you announced you'd be dropping out. Did you have any reaction to that?
I sent him a picture back of the General Motors plant in my district that has an empty parking lot because we lost 4,000 jobs.
Well played.
And told him to get back to work.
And is there anybody that you are prepared to endorse right now that's running?
I'm thinking about it. I don't know. I've been having conversations I've already talked to 3 or 4 of the candidates already.
That's a value to them if you endorse them, obviously.
I mean, they're calling, so I'm assuming it's worth something.
You got nothing to say yet, though.
No, none.
It'll be.
Announcements. But my key is going to be...
All right, we're not recording anymore. Who are you going to endorse?
Who can win?
We're still recording. Who can win? Yeah, who can win?
That to me is
right.
Who can beat Donald Trump?
I really appreciate you sitting down with me. Thanks a lot for doing
Yeah,
this.
do it again.
Tell your friends to do it with me as well. I'm really looking forward to
Let me
it.
know who you want me to talk to.
Congratulations. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks.
All right.
Okay, well, we have now come to the end of episode 2, and at the end of every episode, I'm going to answer your questions. 5 questions to be specific. Ask me on social media or email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com, at Pete Dominic on Twitter and Facebook. Okay, first question Kim asked me was, what book am I reading right now? And you heard me say, it's been a very stressful time, and my friend Barry Ritholtz gave me this book, Stillness is the Key by Ryan Holiday, who is a really good writer and thoughtful guy. And this is like humanist philosophy. He examines figures who have exemplified the power of stillness, people who study Zen. He outlines a path for achieving this ancient but urgently necessary way of living to avoid distraction and discover great insights and achieve happiness. And it's really good. Stillness is the Key by Ryan Holiday is the answer to that book, Kim. Good question. Mario says, if Emperor Trump was to be reelected, would you immediately think foul play, or do you think he rightfully earned it this time? Oh, that's a great question. I would assume foul play, Mario, at this point right now. I think he's going to lose. Nomiki, my friend Nomiki Konst. Oh, hey, hi Nomiki. You got to come on the show. What is the subject you always wanted to discuss on SiriusXM but couldn't? I am proud to say there was no subject that was off limits. I had total editorial control, and that is very unique. And I'm really proud of that and very grateful to SiriusXM for allowing for it. On Twitter, @WiseGuyX says, if one of your daughters came home wearing a nose ring, how would you react? I would be worried about the infection. I would ask her why she wanted to do that, but I think they're really cool, especially on women, and I don't know, they're both pretty young for that, 14 and 12. They have ear piercings. What's the difference? My 12-year-old has a tattoo on her tailbone of a unicorn, so, we're pretty open-minded. And Chris says, which of the regular guests from your radio show will you have on the podcast? That's a great question, Chris. Which guests should I have on the podcast? Which guests would you like to hear that you heard before or that you've never heard on this podcast? Was that 5 questions? Was that 4? One more. Who is your favorite Batman? Christian Bale. That one's easy. Okay, guys, that's it. We're out of time. Thanks so much for listening. I mean, we're not out of time. It's a podcast. You can go there's a whole bunch of ticks I have from live radio that I'm going to have to lose. I could just keep on talking, but I'm going to end it right here. Enjoy your day. Be the change that you want to see. The standard you walk past is the standard you accept. Death to single-use plastic.